Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Get started in 1 minute here. Hello. So the Hyperledger wiki wasn't working this week. So I just put the agenda in a text note here. Can everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get started. For the agenda, we'll talk about the V3 release and the Fabric project charter. Does anybody else have anything on the agenda today? Okay. So this should be pretty quick. So V3 release, as most of you know, we've done a beta release earlier in the year. I know if some people in the community have played around with the new Smart BFT functionality. I think it's ready to go. I guess, Yoav, did you have any other comments about Smart BFT? Is there anything else you want to add before the release?
No, no.
Okay. So I think that's looking good. I'm doing some final preparation. We'll probably do the release here in the next few weeks, the official release for V3. I do have a pull request out there about with a question about whether we remove the V1 capabilities. So the intent was always to, over time, gradually remove some of the earlier capabilities that were superseded by later capabilities. So probably the most obvious example of that is the life cycle that was in there in version 1. It got changed in version 2. And you can use this capability switch to move from the V1 lifecycle to the V2 lifecycle. So I have a pull request out there that proposes removing support for the legacy V1 lifecycle in the version 3 release. Basically, I think the point of discussion is that if we were to do this, then a new peer that tried to join a channel that used both the legacy lifecycle and the new lifecycle from V2 would not be able to process the transactions from the V1 lifecycle, so it wouldn't be able to validate those transactions. The approach that we had always planned for this was to take a snapshot of peers at a certain point in time. We had the snapshot feature added a few years ago, and this was one of the use cases for it, so that new peers could join from the snapshot. They wouldn't have to process the blockchain from the Genesis block. Of course, that's might be a little bit of a hassle for some users, so that's why I've opened up the pull request for discussion. But we can take any feedback on this call if anybody has feedback on this.
A quick
Or
question. Yeah. So the concept sort of, I'll say makes sense to me mentally, because over time, I don't see, I see, I'll call it I guess, a richer, fuller concept of what a blockchain is, which says not everybody's interested in all the history of a blockchain back to the Genesis block, period. And you wind up, in a sense, with what I call subgroups or, domains or however you want to define it, where there are different levels of interest in different segments, if you will, logically, of a blockchain. So what you're talking about actually sort of creates that in a sense, because you now say, okay, so the simple version of what you're talking about says, oh, everybody who's a node on the chain today would have access to all of today's transactions, but not necessarily all the history based on where you came from. So if you were part of the original one, you'd have all the history going back Genesis block, but if you're newer, you won't. And that concept probably should be expanded, in my opinion, to say, wait a second, we have different segments of interest, if you will. And within a network, you would have the ability to access different segments. So like I say, it's not just a simple, here's a single blockchain, but here's a more complex network that offers a set of information that's not all one single chain, if that makes sense at some point. It's sort of like an expanded model over what you're creating just based on the fact that not everybody's going to go back to the origin.
Right, that makes sense. We do have the private data feature. Are you familiar with that? I think what you're
Yes,
talking about
yeah.
was kind of the vision for the private data feature where you're entitled to some of the data, but not all of the data.
Yeah, that's a completely different concept because that is not based on interest, but that's exactly right. That's based on privacy concepts, which is different than I'll call it just interest. So you might have in a real database, I'll say, forget blockchain, you would say, yeah, we have privacy authorization concepts. But in addition to that, we have multiple segments of information that have different levels of history available to you. And you choose, based on your authorizations, what you're interested in. And blockchain hasn't gotten that far yet, obviously. That's all. And then the only other
Yeah.
point I would say is about the BFT thing is that, yes, BFT is fine, a smart BFT, but we also, I assume, have a standard interface for a consensus mechanism that says, hey, you could you could implement other consensus mechanisms that are simpler, if that makes sense.
Yes, so we've talked about Fabric being pluggable. It is so that you can add different consensus methods, but
Right.
it is a large development effort to do so currently with the open source project. We had hoped to kind of refactor some things to make that easier. That didn't happen in the
Okay.
V3 timeframe, but that's still one of the hopes in the future is that we can make that
Yeah,
easier for
as long
people
as
to
that's on the
extend.
roadmap, that would be good to have on the roadmap, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Yoav, I'll ask you, I asked this question in the pull request since you're on, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but with ordering nodes, is the same snapshot approach required, or do we get this kind of for free? Because I think you can join an orderer node to the channel from the latest configuration block, and it doesn't process all the blocks. I think it copies the blocks. It doesn't actually process them. So I think we don't actually have a problem on the ordering service side. Is that correct? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, that's right. You're asking with respect to chain code, right? Right.
I'm having trouble hearing you. I hear you. You're pretty faint, but it's the highlighted question here. If you could take a look at it. I hear you, but you're kind of echoing. You're difficult to understand.
How is it now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. So yeah, in the folder we don't have snapshots, but we only process the outside of the box. We don't really look into the box. So life cycle has no impact on what the order is.
Right. Okay. So I think we can do a test to verify that that's true, but I do believe that's true as well. But we'll keep this open for other comments if anybody else, any other contributors or maintainers want to comment on this before we make a final decision. Okay, let's see. So the blog post. So Yakov is taking a lead on writing a blog post for the V3 announcement. Mostly it'll be highlighting the smart BFT feature because that's the new large feature in V3. So I know he's working on that in the next couple of weeks. He might pull Yoav Ewan or somebody else that worked on smart BFT around that.
Yeah, he got in touch with Hagar and myself, and we're working together towards the blog post.
Okay.
I'm not sure to make it to the 26th because it's vacation season, but
Yeah, that should be fine to come in a little bit later than that. I'm also doing a final pass of documentation. I'm going to remove references to the old life cycle, things like that from legacy things from V1 that are no longer too relevant and are outdated, especially if we do this capability thing. And then I'll make sure all the right information around Smart BFT and the upgrade is in there as well. If anybody else wants to take a look at that as well, I'd be happy to have you join me and we can divide and conquer. Okay, any other questions or comments about the Fabric V3 release?
Yeah, just one question. Any thought on the timing on it?
I think it'll be in September sometime. So I
Okay.
know the Linux Foundation is announcing this. Well, I guess they already announced it, but this concept of decentralized trust
Yeah.
umbrella for projects.
Right.
So we thought while they're making some press releases and things like that around that, we might as well get in there as well and talk about version 3 at the same time. So that's slated for, I think, sometime mid-September.
Yeah, and you brought it up, I didn't, but the decentralized trust concept, I'm not sure how that showed up in a sense, because you had Hyperledger, which was focused on blockchain related technologies, period. They seem to have thought through that and said, hey, let's expand it to go beyond just blockchain technologies and call it decentralized trust as a larger umbrella. What's weird to me is how they didn't expand it to just trust, period. Do you know what I mean? They created a slightly larger umbrella, which I suspect in the future will wind up having to get enlarged again, most likely. So
Yeah,
as
maybe
a
someday
concept, it's
it'll just be called trust. Yeah, I don't know.
well, yeah. So I 2 years ago jumped beyond Hyperledger and started calling everything just Smart Trust Services, which incorporated decentralized, but a lot more than that as well. And somehow this thing, I don't know, it's kind of like what's nice about what you're doing, managing the Fabric project, is that you have places where people like myself who are not maintainers can at least participate and understand what you're thinking and where you're headed. It doesn't appear that that same philosophy happened when they rethought this thing on decentralized trust. So I'm sure some people were involved in it, but it wasn't the same level of, in a sense, I'll call it community thinking that went into it for sure.
Yeah, so we do discuss some of these things on the I'm a member of the Hyperledger TOC, Technical Oversight Committee. We do talk about some of those things on that call, and that is open to the public as well. So you're welcome to join those as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, project charter. I think we showed this last time, but again, as part of the Linux Foundation changes, they're having us adopt more formalized project charters. If you read the details of it, there should be no real surprises there. The link is on the wiki from the last meeting. Basically, it just outlines who's going to provide oversight for the set of open source projects. That would be a technical steering committee for the Hyperledger Fabric project. And we've kind of settled on the definition of this technical steering committee to be comprised of the maintainers from the Fabric project and from the Fabric Gateway project as the strategic SDK, client application SDK for Hyperledger Fabric. This way, both developers on the server side and client side can have a say in the oversight and future direction of the project. Of course, it's always open to the community and other contributors like you guys as well. But just if there's any decisions or votes that we need to make, we had to define exactly what the technical steering committee for the overall project is, not just any one repository. So I think this is a good thing, kind of formalizes some things that we've already been doing and some of the roles and responsibilities of the maintainers. So I think this is a good thing, but not really anything new, just more of a formality in my opinion. But it's out there if anybody else wants to take a detailed look at it and provide any comments before it becomes effective. It says it's adopted, but I think we have to actually have a vote to make sure to determine whether it's adopted or not. Okay, so that's all I had for this meeting. Does anybody else have anything else? Okay, I think that's it then. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Yep. Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you. Yep, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.